Welcome to Nothing But Bet here on Action Network. I'm your host, Maria Marino. In a minute, I'll be joined by our NBA crew of Matt Moore, Chris Raybon, Brandon Anderson, and Gilles Gallant. We're getting you ready for the NBA Finals, which are finally almost here. And throughout the show, we're also going to be building a same game parlay for game one. So let's get into it. And speaking of game one, here's a market report. For the series opener, Dallas getting 6.5 on the road, and that has attracted 78% of the handle, while 98% of money has come in on the full game going over 214.5 points. We now step into the betting lab with Matt Moore and Chris Raybon. All right, we're just going to come right out with it. I want to know who you're taking to win this series. Keep in mind the Celts are around minus 220 or so. Mavs at plus 180. Raybon, who you got to win the NBA Finals?
Boston, and I'll lay it at minus 210 or whatever it is for them to win the series. I also think you could do it a lot of different ways. You can go with the exact score, 4-1 or 4-2 or even 4-0, anything but a 4-3, because I don't think it goes to 7, but I think Boston has a lot of edges here. Number one, with Kristaps Porzingis back, that's really tough for Dallas because Dallas was one of the weaker post defense teams in the playoffs. And then you look at Boston, they have 5 shooters. They never really have lineups with anyone who can't shoot. And that's a lot different from Dallas and Minnesota's matchup where Luka, would roam off guys, and, you had Gobert in there, a non-shooter, and Kyle Anderson. So I just think Boston presents a lot of different matchup issues for Dallas, Lively, Gafford, harder for them to protect the rim with, Porzingis's range, Al Horford's range. It's just a different beast. No real rest for Kyrie or Luka on defense if they have to, because we know they're going to have to carry the load on offense. And then if you look at the trends, this is what really struck me. I think when we get to the finals, we tend to overrate underdogs a little bit. So if you look at favorites, anything higher than a series price of minus 180 entering game one, 28-3 since the merger, 90% of the time favorites that close higher than minus 180 for the series ahead of game one end up winning that trophy. And Boston right now, they're just a little over minus 200 at most books. So they definitely qualify. And then if you look at on the flip side, teams seated outside the top 3, like the Dallas Mavericks, who got here, from the 5 seed, teams seated outside the top 3, just 1-8 in the final since the merger. So the trends are on Boston side, and I think the matchups really kind of flip around here, whereas I thought Dallas matched up with Minnesota very well. I think Boston's a really tough matchup for Dallas, easily the toughest they faced all postseason. And it shouldn't be surprising because, Boston was so dominant for much of the season. So I'm rolling with the Boston Celtics to win.
It shouldn't be so surprising. And yet I feel like the narrative has been, okay, Boston, who did they beat? And they played, teams without their best player. And then, how great Luka's playing. And so I can see why people are, kind of jumping on this Mavs bandwagon, despite the trends that you discussed where heavy favorites they do very well. They clean up in the finals historically. But Matt, what do you think, and how are you attacking this series?
Well, I've been doing research on this series for basically 2 weeks since game 2 of the Western Conference Finals, knowing this was going to be our matchup. I've done all this work, and I got to tell you, Chris Raybon's 28-3 for series favorites minus 180 is maybe the best number that I've heard in all there. So I'm very jealous that Chris brought that one to the table. That's an excellent trend, I think. Look, I think you can't argue the Mavs are a better team. You cannot do it. The Boston Celtics are a top 5 SRS team. That's simple rating system. That's just point differential versus strength of schedule. They've killed everyone this year. They've dominated. That's just the reality. You can talk about the Eastern Conference being weak. You can talk about the playoffs and everybody being injured. They've taken care of business. They have a plus 10.4 net rating in the playoffs. That's one of the best ones that we've seen. So you can't argue the Mavs are better. Now, you don't have to bet the better team here, but you better have a matchup advantage. And like Chris laid out, there's not a matchup advantage for Dallas in the series like there was versus Minnesota. This is very much okay, there are some things that are going to go Dallas's way. There's a lot more things that are probably going to go Boston's way, and Boston's the better team. So I like Celtics here, but I do want Celtics minus 1.5 on the series spread, plus 105. I get a plus 105 number, taking away some of that juice, and I don't have to worry about a game 7. By not have to worry about it, I mean, if we get there and I've lost it, I'm fine with it. Fine. I don't care. If we get to game 7, I don't want to have to worry about Boston. I'm not sweating through Luka Doncic in a game 7 versus Jason Tatum and the Celtics. No thanks. So I'm taking Celtics minus 1.5 on the series spread.
Oh, I could just imagine the head cases we would see on Boston, like if it went 7 and having to be in that situation. Real quick, Raybon, I do want to follow up with you because you had said you're not expecting, you said anything before 3, you're not expecting like this to go 7. Can you just like expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So if, for example, let's say you like the Celtics to win, but you don't want to lay the juice, and you also don't want any parts of, if it gets to 7, you're like, all right, I'm just gonna take it, take my money and get out of here.
Yeah.
So that really means you want Celtics either in a sweep, which is around 6-1, Celtics 4-2 is around plus 475, and Celtics 4-1 is plus 340. So any of those 3 results, Celtics winning, except for Celtics winning 4-3, you can actually bet on each of those other 3 and lock in a small profit if the Celtics, win, earlier than 7. So there's, Matt kind of did it with the minus 1.5, but you can also kind of, start out laying a little more on the plus 600 for a sweep. And then, as you can kind of adjust as you go, or, bet the games. There's a lot of different things you can do here by kind of taking those other plus money numbers for Celtics at 4-0, 4-1, and 4-2, because, I think if this series gets to 7, then the handicap was probably wrong and the Celtics are probably in trouble anyway. So I do think, and most, historically speaking, if you just look at, past finals, 6 tends to be the kind of, the sweet spot. Like, 7 is rare, just like sweeps are rare. But 6 is the sweet spot. If I had a bet, I would, Celtics 4-2 at plus 475. I like that one a lot.
I see. I appreciate you laying that out because, that makes sense. The 7 doesn't work with your cap, but your cap is obviously still tried and true. And we're going to get into more of those series scenarios in just a bit with Brandon Anderson. But first, we have to build not just any parlay, but the notorious SGP. We're bringing it back. We're going to have a leg in each segment of the show, starting with this one. And Matt, you get to do the honors. What's your best bet for game 1? That's going to be our first leg of our same game parlay.
All right, since it seems like, I don't know, like 3/4 of our on-air talent have taken the Boston Celtics in this, I'll try and vary it up here, and let's go with the over 214.5. Let's start with where the market's at. You can track this in the Action Network app, especially if you get a pro account, you'll be able to see this. 92% of the tickets are on the over, 98% of the money. Usually that's a little bit worrisome, right? We don't want to be tailing the public here, but we're also tracking sharp action on the over. Now I'm a little bit worried because this thing hasn't moved more. Open 214, only moved to 214.5. So it's possible there's some sharp money that's kind of limiting this down, or there's just not enough handle to get a strong signal on it. But from where I'm at, the over has to be the play. I think this is an offensive series, not a defensive one. As much as Dallas has impressed people with their defensive performance over the last half of the season, they won the Minnesota series on offense. That was really kind of the program that they were able to get the advantage on. They were putting up big numbers in that series. The under has been a popular play with the Mavericks, but a lot of that was tied to Luka Doncic's struggle early in the playoffs when he was injured. He's looked much healthier, and as a result, this has started to turn to more offense for the Dallas Mavericks and less of a defensive battle. Boston's best defense in this series, Chris kind of alluded to this, is for them to make the Mavericks play catch up with 3-pointers. So both these teams will try and create threes at a pretty high volume, but Boston's excellent at it. And if Boston's going to win this series, overall, like I do think they are, that means that they're probably going to hit a lot of threes. The shot variance can go the other way in this one, and that could go ahead and kill this leg of the parlay. But I'll go ahead and I'll play the numbers here and take the over 214.5. If I'm wrong about Boston, though, guess what? The Mavs in the playoffs, when they win, the over is 8-4 in those games. So either the Mavs win and it goes over 8-4 as it has throughout the course of these playoffs, or the Celtics win and the cap's right that they go ahead and they put up a big number here, and that alone gets us to the over 214.5. So the first leg of the SGP, over 214.5 in game one.
And none of this if I'm wrong stuff. Come on, we are manifesting this same game parlay. I don't want to hear that. But what I do want to hear is real quick, Raybon, I know you don't actually have like an official play on the total, but what did you make of what Matt said in terms of like offensive versus defensive series and such?
Yeah, I agree. I think, Boston's made it kind of known that, it wants to come out and win that 3-point battle. And then, if Boston's doing that and the Mavs have to play catch up, I mean, you got a guy like Luka Doncic who could just hit the most ridiculous threes you've ever seen in your life and force the issue. So, teams are well rested here. So, tired legs shouldn't be an issue. The starters should be able to go, as long as they need to. Both teams are very well rested. And, as a bonus, it's still the NBA Finals. So, if we are, like Matt said, if we're a little wrong on Boston, one of the other outcomes is it could just be a very close game. And you always have overtime coming to play with these overs as well. So I do like it. But the one thing I will say, anytime I see like 98% of money on the over,
I know.
But then again, it's game one of the finals. It's going to be at least a 4-game series. So the books might just be, okay, you could take that and then and they'll win later on, or maybe they're already, situated and it doesn't matter. Their total just doesn't matter to them or something. But that is odd that, that much of the handle is on the over and we haven't really seen too much movement. But yeah, I lean over as well.
It's okay. It's all fine. I like the point that you made about just both teams being rested, theoretically ready to go, ready to be firing. And also, like, I think as the series goes on, this might just be a cliche, but I feel like you get more tight as the series goes on. And, first game is like feeling it out, we're feeling loose, bombs away. Let's go. All right. One leg down. Chris Raybon, one segment down. Thank you so much for hanging with us on Nothing But Bet.
Always a pleasure.
Take a look at the most bet series predictions via MGM. The highest ticket percentage is on the Celtics to win the finals 4-2 at plus 350. And the highest handle percentage is on the Celtics to win 4-3 at plus 450. So most people expecting a longer series. All right, we have Brandon Anderson with us now. Looking at this series, what do you think it's going to come down to?
I think it's a 3-point series. I think if you love threes, this is the series for you. This is the shot variance are us series. So Boston, number 1 in threes in the regular season, number 1 in 3-point attempts, number 2 in percentage, almost 39% for the season. If you look at it on the whole season now, Boston, when they make at least 35%, not even that good, they're 58-6. They're nearly invincible as long as they just don't completely poop the bed shooting threes. Dallas is number 2 in threes. So these are the two teams that rank dead last at 2-pointers. This is not a series in the paint. This is a series outside the arc, which makes it unpredictable. We're getting a lot of threes, and we know that that can be a little harder to know what's happening. The Mavericks, though, are closer to league average on 3-point percentage, and they take the most corner threes in the league, but Boston is number 1 defending corner threes. So I think that this sets up a spot where Dallas, their defense, we've seen a lot of improvement. We've seen that's why they're in the finals, but that's a rim protection improvement. I'm not sure that their defense has been as good against threes. So I think Boston takes more threes with better shooters against the worst 3-point defense. And I think that means advantage Celtics for the series.
So what you're telling me is we are going to either have ugly or beautiful games, depending on who's making or missing shots. But that being said, what's your best bet for the series as a whole, Brandon?
So I'm calling my best bet Boston to win but not sweep. But this doesn't exist. We're going to have to create it. We had to get creative a little bit. So let me explain. So here's the case first. I think the value is on Boston. Boston is what, like minus 225-ish at most books now. Even at that number, I think that's short. I think they should be a bigger favorite. Here's some of the numbers. You heard it from Raybon already with the history, but teams with a better record in the finals, 18-6 this century, that's 75%. 31-10 since the 16-game playoff, that's 78%. Teams win game one, 31-9. The game one winners are 24-7 to win the series. All the numbers here are like 75% and above. That's what a lot of Raybon's numbers were as well. That implies at least a minus 300, maybe higher, because Dallas is still only a 5 seed. Boston's a dominant 1 seed. So I think Boston should be the favorite, but I don't like to bet my minus 225s. So how can we fix that a little bit? Boston to win but not sweep. I'm going to count for some variance. Porzingis, the 3-pointers. Dallas has the best player. I think the series goes long. I don't think we're getting a sweep. I'm going to give the Mavs at least a game. Luka Doncic, 7-1 against the spread, series spread in his career. So I want Boston, but no sweep. And if we get creative, we can kind of Frankenstein our bet here. So here's the bet. Celtics in 5 is plus 400 at Caesars. Celtics in 6 is plus 500 at bet at ESPN. And Celtics in 7, the one you just had up on the screen, plus 450 at bet MGM. If we do all of those, and I'm taking them all, 1 unit on each one, combined, we get a minus 122. Minus 122 instead of minus 225. All I'm losing is the sweep. I don't need that nasty minus 225. Just give me the combined Celtics to win, but not sweep, minus 122. That's the best bet.
If you want to hear more of this debate about exactly the outcomes of this, you can check out Buckets, because Brandon and I are on the same side and yet found a way to disagree, of course, where Brandon likes them in 5, 6, 7, not 4. And I like the Celtics in 4, 5, 6, not 7. I don't want any part of having the Boston Celtics in a Game 7 environment versus Luka Doncic. No thanks. I'll pass on that. I am willing to go ahead and get the variance in case there's an injury or something else wonky in the finals, and this does wind up being a sweep. The rest of Brandon's work on this obviously is his usual level of stellarness. I just am a little bit concerned about the possibility of things going rapidly in one direction or another. So I will also say, though, that Brandon, I think, is more confident in Boston's ability to win a long series than I am. I have concerns about that. The longer this series goes, the more I think it tilts towards Dallas. I have bets on Boston in 6, but it better feel like, well, the series is mostly over and they wrapped it up in 6. If this is like, boy, I don't know, then I'm going to start getting nervous for all of our bets at the end of that series. But that's where I kind of feel. Brandon, look, I'm so proud of you during these playoffs for taking some juice. You've done such a good job of actually paying juice. I know you got a long shot, buddy. What's your long shot for the series?
Yeah, my favorite long shot, and this honestly is just one of my favorite bets straight up in the final. This is a full unit play for me, even though it's a long shot. I love Jason Tatum to have a double-double in every finals game. That's 16-1. This is a family bet. If you listen to the Buckets props preview, Joe Delera was on this, Jim Turby was on this. We all three chose this one. So that's a good sign to me if we're all on the same page here. Double-double, look, the points are given. Tatum's going to get to 10 points. I need to make that case. So it's really a rebounding bet. He's going to play huge minutes. He's been their leading rebounder. He is the series predicted leading rebounder by the numbers. So far this postseason, in 14 games, Tatum's had a double-double in 11 out of 14 games. That's a 79% hit rate. Now, he did miss once each series. We can't have that. We can't miss once. We got to miss 0. But if you go the math here, if you think a 6-game series on average, we need Tatum to at least have a 62% chance of a double-double for this number that we're betting to be in our favor. So far, we're at 79%. The math on that says this should be priced not at 1,600, but plus 310. We're getting 16-1 on what could maybe be a 3 to 4 to 1 odds here. So let's hope for no blowouts. Let's hope for no injuries. If Matt's right and we do get a short series, let's hope it's short and Tatum takes care of business every game. That's my long shot. I think Tatum double-double is the way to go, 16-1.
I'll be the older brother that tisks at his younger brothers making up these kind of nonsense bets. Look, I think there's good value on this. I'm in the weeds a little bit, I'll admit here, in terms of how much I've dug down on this film. This is what happens when you have 9 days off, is I'm looking at like the splits of splits. But part of this is that I do think that the Celtics are going to put Jason Tatum on Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, at least to start the series. They want to pre-switch so that if Luka tries to run 1-5 pick and roll, Tatum switches onto Luka on the perimeter. And that takes away that option immediately from Luka, because Luka will be like, no thanks, I'll pass on that, at least some. The result of that, though, is that they don't run 1-5. That means that Tatum is now having to box out Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford. Tatum's probably 6'10". He's taller than what he's listed at, but he's also not as tall as Gafford and Lively. Those guys are bigger, so I'm worried about their ability to take away some of his rebounding performance. And if you want some data on that, guess what? The second game that they played after the trade deadline, that was a game in where Tatum did not have 10 rebounds. So I have concerns about this bet. But Joe and Brandon and Jim are also much better prop bettors than I am. So I have at 16-1, I got a feeling I'm going to be cranky as this one cashes by the end of the series.
Well, look, the bargain price is certainly attractive, but as you did point out, Brandon, like expecting that longer series, the longer it goes, is like, could that affect the likelihood? But I will say this, A+ for creativity today between that and the Frankenstein bet. Now let's keep it going because we need you to do your part. We are building the notorious SGP for Mavs Celtics Game 1. We have one leg already, which is the game to go over the total, courtesy of Matt. So Brandon, why don't you give us your Game 1 best bet for our second leg of the parlay?
Yeah, enough creativity. I'm going to keep this one very simple. Just give me the Celtics, -6.5 or whatever is the best number that you can find. Home team Game 1 in the finals is one of the best bets you can make in basketball. In the last 19 years from our Bet Labs data, that team is 16-3 ATS, 16-3 against the spread, 17-2 straight up. It's an 89% win rate. That's even up from historical in the 16-team format, 78%. Basically, look, we know Boston's thing. We know that they kind of screw around. I don't know if they show up. Are they mentally locked in? It's the finals. You've played the entire season to get here to host Game 1 and be there. History says you show up in that spot, the crowd's rocking. And on the Dallas side, Jason Kidd, 3-7 ATS and straight up in Game 1 for his career as a coach. Luka Doncic, this might surprise you, his first game of a playoff series, he's 2-6 straight up. He's been a guy that loses early on and comes back and figures some things out later to push the series along. So I just want to bet the home team here. If I like the Celtics so much in the series, I have to like them in Game 1 to go ahead and get on the right foot. So this is my best bet for Game 1. I think this is the perfect bet for a parlay.
Well, I like it because, and part of why I think Luka's Game 1 record is this way, is there's not really urgency for Dallas to go out and win Game 1. Would it be nice if they still won? Absolutely, but it's not necessary in any way for them to win Game 1 in order to actually come back and win the series. But Brandon, thank you very much for your contributions. We got a leg for the same game parlay. We got some long shots. We got Frankenstein. It's all good. So thanks again for hopping on.
Thanks, guys.
Check out these prop leaders for Game 1 of the NBA Finals. The highest points prop belongs to Luka Doncic at 31.5. Jason Tatum has the highest rebounds prop at 9.5. And we have Luka once again with the highest assist prop at 8.5. Time for picks and roll as we welcome Gilles Gallant to the party. Gilles, I know you've had plenty of time to stew over this game and what you're going to pick. So what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we almost have like too much time. I think that's sometimes you end up like making up weird angles in your head about ways that you could capitalize on this series. But we're going to keep it simple. We're going to go to Derek Lively, actually. And we're going to take over 1.5 assists. So I tracked this on the Action app yesterday at +145. It's all the way down to about even odds right now. So make sure if you are tailing to get it at plus money. Now, Lively has hit this in 5 straight games, 6 of the last 7 games overall. And in the last series against the Timberwolves, he was actually 3rd on the Mavericks in potential assists per game and total potential assists. And he did that despite missing a game and a half. He hit this actually in Game 3 in only 9 minutes of play. And I also think this is a bit of a fade on Daniel Gafford, who I think might have a bit of an unfortunate series because I just think he's going to be a bit of a liability defensively. And outside of game 3, when Lively got hurt, Gafford's minutes was just trending downward, where Lively is playing more than Gafford. And also Lively just a much quicker defender than Gafford, also more of a lob threat, and clearly more of a passing threat than Daniel Gafford, who only had 2 assists total versus Minnesota in 5 games. So at plus money, I think this is a solid bet, given we're going to probably see 27 to 30 minutes from Lively in game 1.
I'm just so glad we're seeing Derek Lively. He's going to be back. You know, didn't miss too much time previously with some of the hard hits he had. He's been such a fun player to watch. Now, Gilles, what about a series prop? What do you think for that?
Yeah, it's still 3 p.m. somewhere. I think we still have to get a 3-point bet in for the series. And initially, Maria and Matt, I was looking at Jason Tatum thinking maybe this is a good buy low spot, especially with how he struggled so far. But I think if you're betting this market, like Luka Doncic is the favorite, I think you can't go any farther than Derek White. I think Derek White is the guy that you want here at plus 500 for the most made threes in the NBA Finals. So he leads the Celtics in 3-point attempts in the playoffs. He also leads the Celtics in total 3-point makes in each round of the playoffs so far. And just in the postseason overall, he's top 10 in 3-point makes and 3-point attempts. And I talk about this a lot about where those shots are coming from. Derek White, 63% of all of his shots are coming from behind the arc. I already alluded to Jason Tatum, where he's around 6-1 for this market. And I don't really agree with it, especially with how he just hasn't shot well from 3-point in the playoffs. He's around 29%, and he could just get his points in other ways. So same thing with Luka Doncic, who is favored for this market, but he can get his points in other ways as well. So I think Celtics favored, having home court. I think we could just see one big game from Derek White where he'll have 7 or even 8 3-pointers, and it could really sway the entire market. I mean, he's got 7 games already in the playoffs this year with 4 or more 3-pointers, has a couple with, 5 or even 7 3-pointers made. So he has at least one of those 4 3-pointer games in each of the series so far. So again, Derek White, there's just too many numbers to bring it up. But I think Derek White is the guy that you want to bet if you're betting most made threes in the NBA Finals.
Love this bet. I think it's phenomenal by Jill. I say that because I've already bet it. So, I hope he's right. I'll say this, that a couple things. The Mavericks want to shut off the paint. That's their number one priority. That's how they've gotten to this point defensively, is they're like, oh, we're just going to pack the paint and then make you shoot jumpers. And the Boston Celtics are like, we made the whole plane out of jumpers. And so there's just going to be a lot of volume. If we know this is going to be a 3-point volume series, and Brandon talked about that as well with the variance in this series. If we know it's going to be this shot variant series, then taking some long shots to lead in the series 3-point leader, I think is a really smart approach here. And then if you do break this down into actual specific mechanisms, if you go back and you watch the film, not just from the last Mavericks game, but from the last couple of times that Boston and Dallas have played, what you're going to notice is that Derek White gets a lot of opportunities on open looks. The Mavericks game plan has been specifically more geared towards, let's put contest on Kristaps Porzingis on open threes. Let's put contest on Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and even Drew Holiday to a certain extent. And Holiday, I think, is going to probably have the most open looks, but he's also the worst shooter on the floor for Boston. White, on the other hand, is absolutely capable of having one of those games, like Gilles mentioned, where he hits 7 of 10, he hits 8 of 10. That's in Derek White's possible tail end outcome, and he's going to get those opportunities in every single game. And on top of that, by the way, I actually looked this up. Derek White does lead the Boston Celtics in transition 3-point attempts. And so if they're trying to push pace, guess what? White's going to get those up as well. Dallas, not a great transition defensive team. I obviously love this because it's confirmation bias, but even if I hadn't already bet it, I'd be betting it now. Great breakdown by Gilles.
It's funny you say that, because as you were talking, I'm thinking, wow, Matt really does love this bet. And you know what? I'm with you too. I like it. D White he's been underrated at times, and I think he's just so crucial to everything the Celtics want to do. Rooting for this hard. Okay, time to round out the notorious SGP for game 1. We already have 2 legs down. Now, Gilles, it's up to you to give us our 3rd and final leg.
All right, well, I'm going to go with Kristaps Porzingis to have 2 or more 3-pointers. So over 1.5 3-pointers. I think he is going to be the key of unlocking the Celtics offense. And Porzingis just is a much better shooter at home as well. The home and road splits, I generally don't pay attention to a ton when it comes to 3-point shooting, but I will just say with Porzingis, I do think it's very important for him, especially coming back off of this injury and having the crowd behind him, because he's averaged over 2 3-point makes in home games. But if you include the playoffs, Porzingis has hit this in 10 of the last 15 home games, including the playoffs. And also, if you just look for the entire season, 30 games played in Boston, he has hit this in 21 of 30 games. That's a 70% hit rate. One of those games was against Dallas in March, and he hit 4 3-pointers in that game. And I alluded to this earlier about Derek Lively. I think they're going to target Daniel Gafford as much as possible. I think it'll be easier to spread out on the perimeter. So if Porzingis is healthy and he's back to 100%, I mean, this leg could probably hit in the first quarter.
Okay, we'll throw it into the SGP. I'm a little worried about it. I'll say this. The reason I'm concerned, this is going to be a weird series with cross matches because both these teams want to switch in pick and roll. They want to switch all these screens on and off ball. And so one of the things that Dallas did in the last matchup was they actually put Gafford and Lively, they put them on Drew Holiday and had PJ Washington take Porzingis. And the reason they did that was specifically so they could switch that pick and pop action and try and not let Porzingis get to those kind of threes. However, this is game 1 of the finals and it's a feel it out spot. So there's a very good possibility that, like, I wouldn't be shocked if Porzingis hits 2 3-pointers in the first quarter. Like, that wouldn't shock me at all because they'll try basic coverage with Gafford defending Porzingis and be like, let's try it and see how this goes. And we'll see if we can kind of manage it. And Gilles absolutely right that he's going to cook whenever Gafford's on the floor. So there's going to be those type of opportunities. The course of the series, probably not, but this game 1, I do think that if you're going to play it, this is definitely the game to do so.
I was even going to say too, Matt, I know some people will be a little bit worried about the injury. And obviously that is something that is in my mind when considering this, but and again, this is a split that you could take it with a grain of salt, but I still think it's important. When you look at his shot splits off of 3 or more days rest, his shooting just obviously increases. He's hit 2.7 3-point makes per game. There's 12 games where he had 3 or more days rest. He had 2.7 3-point makes per game, shooting over 47% from 3-point in those games. So I'm going to probably ladder this too, 3+ and 4+.
I'm so glad you brought that up about the rest, because I was certainly wondering about the rust. I know Matt despises that word, but I feel like you've quelled my fears, Gilles. And also I have to give you credit because you were on Action Island with us last week. You gave Luka over his 3 points prop and he nailed that bad boy in like the first quarter. So well done, Gilles. Well done, Matt Moore as well. Thank you guys so much for your contributions. And here we go. Finals. Let's go.
All right. See each other again soon.
See ya. I do want to recap the notorious SGP that we've built throughout the show. So once again, we have the over 214.5, courtesy of Matt Moore. Celtics -6.5 via Brandon Anderson. Also Kristaps Porzingis over 1.5 threes per Gilles Gallant. And that would give you a payout of about +400 right now for game 1.
Baby.
Well, it's time for me to get in one final parting shot at the buzzer. And while the NBA has enjoyed some time off lately, we've all gotten a little bit of a breather. The WNBA has been raging on. And I've noticed something, apart from the drama, NBA players seem to get a lot more leeway from officials than WNBA players. And I find that a little bit annoying. Let's take Luka Doncic, for example. His antics with the officials and the tendencies to complain, it's been a pretty consistent topic for a while. He led the NBA in technical fouls assessed this season at 19. He has 1 tech in the last 4 weeks, while Caitlin Clark already has 3 in the last 3 weeks. Angel Reese was given 2 just last night, one of which has now been rescinded. And in each of these instances, I'm watching and thinking to myself, I see way more egregious acts by NBA players all the time without getting teed up. I mean, like screaming in officials' faces. And honestly, I hate it. I don't want the whining to be a hallmark of the WNBA, but what I do want is ball players to be treated like ball players. And it feels like if a W player says anything negative in the direction of an official, there's just zero tolerance, while NBA players are more often given a pass. So let's see that standard evened out a little bit more, and we'll see how many instances occur over these NBA finals where you're like, hey, that could have been a T, but it wasn't. We're out of time now on Nothing But Bet. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks again for hanging with us. Enjoy the finals.